Hello again, everybody. This is the Way Too Indiecast number 4. It's the TIFF 2014 wrap-up edition. If you're listening again, if you listen to our previous podcast, you might remember me. I'm CJ Prince. I'm a writer on the site, and I'm here with Dustin Jancic, our editor and founder of Way Too Indie.
Hello, guys.
And I'm also with Nikola Grzdanovic. He's one of our writers on the site.
Hello, hello.
All right. So we're here for yet another special edition of the Way Too Indiecast, our fourth Way Too Indiecast. We survived TIFF. We talked about it before. If you haven't listened to our previous Indiecast where we went over, what we were anticipating at TIFF, along with kind of discussing some of the politics behind the festival, go back and listen to that. But if not, and you just want to hear our experience from the festival, definitely listen to this one, because we're going to get right into it. We're going to talk about our favorites of the festival, what we thought were the best movies we saw, along with the worst films we saw, and a whole bunch of other stuff going on. The most important thing about TIFF to a lot of people is the People's Choice Award. The public decides who's going to, what the best film is. Last year, 12 Years a Slave won, and obviously went on to win Best Picture at the Oscars. This year, the winner is The Imitation Game. Now, I don't think any of us actually saw it.
No,
but
that's crazy. None of us saw it.
It's coming out anyway, though, so, we'll definitely, have coverage on the site when it comes out. But, I'm not exactly surprised. It's been like a big Oscar runner, and this kind of puts it at the front of the race. But we're going to go straight to the best of the festival. So I think between all three of us, we watched probably close to 100 movies, or somewhere around there, right?
Yeah, probably. I mean, counting some overlaps, but yeah, for sure. I mean, I saw 20, and you saw what? 40?
So I saw 35 at the festival, but I saw around 51 overall.
Jeez, yeah.
So I watched about 24 shorts as well.
That's crazy. I think I ended up watching around 27 in total, including 2 screeners. So 25 screenings in actual Toronto, and then 2 screeners on the side.
Yeah, I think we did good. But all right, so let's talk about I figure let's talk about the one that all three of us saw during our stay at the festival, and I think that all three of us are in complete agreement about that. It's probably the best, or at least one of the best things we saw at the festival, and that one is Nightcrawler.
Yes, that's such a great film.
Oh yeah.
I got a lot of buzz going into it, right? Because it made our list, and I think it even made our fall most anticipated list on Way Too Indie. So it was a film that everyone was talking about, and I didn't watch the trailers. I didn't follow too much about it. I didn't want to ruin it or spoil it or anything for it. So I didn't know much about it going in, and I just knew that it was highly anticipated by a lot of people. So for me, it was a complete holy cow, this is awesome. This was worth all sort of this hype that I kept hearing people talk about and were so excited about seeing. And it was amazing. It really kind of blew me away, actually.
Yeah. So I don't know, Nicola, do you want to maybe for listeners kind of give a very brief synopsis so they can get familiarized with what Nightcrawler is about?
Sure. Yeah, Nightcrawler is written, directed by Dan Gilroy, so it's his first sort of feature as a director, which is crazy. He's known as a screenwriter. He wrote Real Steel, and he's also influenced a lot by his older brother Tony, who was the director of Michael Clayton and writer of Bourne Legacy and stuff like that. So this is where I guess Dan Gilroy's influence comes from, and the Nightcrawler deals basically with the sort of underground world of freelance journalists. It stars Jake Gyllenhaal as this guy called Lou Bloom. It's set in LA, and Bloom is basically just sort of a manipulative kind of petty thief in the very beginning, and he tries to sort of try and find all sorts of means to scavenge some kind of money for himself, and he finds a way to do it through basically filming these gruesome acts of horrendous sort of accidents and stuff like that, and then trying to sell them to nightly news. And then he finds Rene Russo, who plays one of the news directors, and then they sort of get into this very sort of strange kind of working relationship where he would send him the stuff, and it basically is, at the end of the day, really a character study of this guy Lou Bloom, who is, slightly psychotic and but extremely compelling to watch. And Gyllenhaal just like knocks it out of the park. His performance is crazy. I think it's probably his best performance yet, and that's saying something because he's been in a little bit of a role recently. So yeah, I think that's kind of in a nutshell. I don't want to give too much away because people should definitely watch it with this, knowing as little as possible. Kind of like Dustin said. I mean, that kind of reaction is usually the best kind of reaction.
I asked CJ after seeing it, because you guys saw the premiere. You guys went to the premiere of it on, what was that? Was that Friday night you guys went to it?
Yeah, that was the first Friday, yeah.
Yeah, and then so I saw the next screening, which was actually a Saturday at noon the next day. And I remember I asked you, CJ, I'm like, well, what is this film about? Because I literally, I didn't know, like, I knew Jake Gyllenhaal was in it, and I knew sort of like a throwback-ish kind of, I don't know, I knew it was kind of like a bizarre sort of film, but other than that, I didn't know anything about it. So I remember just asking you, and you kind of went through that sort of basic synopsis, and I was just like, wow, well, that sounds really interesting.
Yeah, I would say, like, yes, Jake, it is, I put some thought on it, but I think it is Jake Gyllenhaal's best performance to date. I think it's the best thing Rene Russo's done in ages. I was like I was like, oh my god, like she can act again.
Yeah.
But to me, what I kind of loved about it, what struck out to me was, for I guess it's a mainstream film, it's going to get a wide release in Halloween now. And I think it is trying to push for Oscars. But what shocked me is this movie is one of the darkest mainstream kind of movies I've seen in a long, long time. It is a brutal, like searing, tearing apart kind of, the kind of, I guess, as pretentious as it sounds, like late era U.S. capitalism, the whole like trying to find the way how you can barely find work now, and the way everything is up. Like Jake Gyllenhaal's character is kind of like this person who just lives and breathes the kind of corporate culture that's been that's kind of in everything now, and he speaks in these very short kind of quippy phrases and pieces of advice you'd see on like inspirational posters or some crap. And I was blown away by just how ruthless it is and how dark it gets. Like I told I think Nicola after, I was like, this is pretty much like, to me it reminded me of Taxi Driver and Network. So yeah,
the movies that sort of compared to Nightcrawler are exactly those two, like Network and Taxi Driver, and that it's because of that cynical nature that's within. Like both of those movies starred like these huge, stars in those days, like Robert De Niro, Faye Dunaway, etc. And they both had this extremely dark, cynical, view of life and of media and of just society in these huge American cities. So
yeah, actually, yeah. I the first film that I gravitated right after seeing the film was actually American Psycho, with Christian Bale and him sort of playing this anti-hero, sort of this really weird person that he's so weird you can't put your finger on it, but you almost feel yourself rooting for him at times. And like you catch yourself, you're like, wait a minute, this guy's a bad person. He's doing really bizarre things. Like, so I actually gravitated kind of like I definitely see those connections in those two films. But the first one that I kind of went to was like American Psycho.
Yeah, that makes sense because he is. Jake Gyllenhaal. I think he starts as more of a sociopath and then becomes a psychopath by him. But you're right. He does have a very kind of compelling yet horrific quality to him that just kind of, and as it develops and goes on and on and on, like, and he just gets worse and worse and worse.
Yeah,
but like, at the same time, that's what makes him essentially better, I guess.
And let's not forget like who it was shot by, Robert Elswit, who did There Will Be Blood, Magnolia, Boogie Nights, basically like P.T. Anderson's right-hand man, and a ton of other things. I think Michael Clayton. There's a lot of other films that he's been the cinematographer for. So, it's a beautifully shot film, a lot of it at night, so he still is able to capture sort of this really dark side of Los Angeles that you don't really get a chance to see in film, or at least not like this, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely not. Yeah, and it's shot on film too, which I found interesting.
Well, just, Nightcrawler is coming out in just over a month now at the end of October, so...
Yeah, I just wanted to say that it's absolutely the most perfect release date for this movie, Halloween.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, no,
and I'm not sure if I agree with the award season push. Like, I mean, not to say that this isn't good enough to be some sort of Oscar winner in one of the categories. I have a hard time seeing it make much of a push. And maybe that is a good segue into our next topic.
Yeah, because that's going to be... this is one I didn't catch, but you, Dustin, and Nick, you both got to see this one, which I think now is after the premiere at TIFF is now, I think, one of the other front runners along with The Imitation Game for Oscars. So I'll let Dustin start on this one, the theory of everything.
All right, yeah, the theory of everything, like CJ said, is definitely an Oscar pick, sort of written all over it. We kind of knew that going into the festival. I sort of like a personal attachment to Stephen Hawking. I just find him fascinating. So like I sort of gravitate anything that has his name written on it. I'm a huge fan of. So the theory of everything is based off a memoir of his first wife, Jane Hawking, which in the film it sort of chronicalizes his life from the time the two met at the university, Cambridge, and basically it shows Stephen Hawking as a student, and they meet at a party pretty early on in the film. It slowly but surely shows him getting or developing Lou Gehrig's disease. So he sort of loses his voluntary muscle movement and eventually his speech. Everyone knows sort of the scientific achievements that Stephen Hawking does or is known for. But this film really sort of gives a little bit more insight on his personal life, which I didn't know a ton about, and also shows his personal and like family life, which is really interesting. And the performance that Eddie Rayman put on is absolutely fantastic. Like at this point, he's got to be one or two in the talks of Oscar nominations. I know it's still pretty early on, but Nick, you didn't enjoy the film as much, I think, as I did, so I want to hear what your thoughts are on it first.
Yeah, I enjoyed it way more than I thought I would, which which just goes to show, I guess, how cynical I am. Because like and you got in expecting exactly what you said, like sort of an Oscar baity movie, and a very sort of standard biopic of a legendary person, etc., etc. So I didn't, and I walked away pretty much, getting what I bargained for, except that I didn't think that it was going to affect me as much on a sort of emotional level, and that's
right.
Due to basically, I think, two things. Number one is the performances from Eddie Redmayne and Felicity Jones, and their chemistry together, which is crazy, really palpable, and you can really sort of they really have this crazy way of showing how much these two people loved each other, and also how deep their friendship was, not just the love, but the friendship as well.
Right.
Which becomes like very important towards sort of the middle and end of the movie. But the other thing that really caught my eye was the cinematography. I didn't think that the cinematography was going to be so good, and the man who shot it is Benoit Delhomme. He also shot A Most Wanted Man this year, and he, I don't know, there is so many shots and scenes in that film that really kind of took my breath away. Just to sort of give a few examples, there's a beginning moment when Jane and Stephen are kind of just meeting in Cambridge and stuff, and they're looking at the fireworks and a starry night and stuff. It looks crazy good. And then there's a moment later on when Stephen's in Bordeaux and he's looking at the slideshow and stuff. Like, the play of light in the film is really pretty splendid. So next to Eddie Redmayne's performance, which I'm also thinking is most likely locked for an Oscar at this point, I'm thinking the cinematography is also going to get a few shout outs because it looks gorgeous.
Yeah, no, it totally does. It's really well shot. But I mean, I do kind of agree. I mean, it is maybe a little too sappy at times. Like it's definitely. I mean, it's certainly going to play with your or manipulate your emotions. I mean, that's what it's set out to do, and it does, I think, a pretty good job at it. And it can be a little conventional at times, a little bit too. I mean, just like any biopic, really. And and I should have said that earlier. But it does definitely touch on a scientific achievements, and I think it does it pretty well as far as like sort of encapsulating what he did achieve. It's like if you went into it not knowing anything about Stephen Hawking, I think it does a fairly good job of sort of catching you up to show you like what this guy is achieving, or at least what his ambitions are. Wouldn't you agree? Like, I mean, it doesn't go into everything that he's done in his sort of his theories on black holes and like get into the quantum physics of everything, but it certainly does touch on them. I mean, it doesn't just skip them altogether.
No, definitely not. And I think that there would have been a lot of backlash if it just ignored them. And like, I think that for sure the filmmakers definitely paid a lot of attention to the major points of his career.
Right.
Brief history of time, there was no way that they were not going to mention that. So for sure. They just contextualize it around this personal story with his wife. And the perspective is from Jane Hawking. I mean, they are her memoirs. So the whole story is told through her kind of point of view and how she dealt with his condition as well. So I found that that's probably also a very a thing that kind of draw me to the film, because it's something that doesn't make it too conventional. You don't really see that every day.
I mean, I have to stay quiet on this because obviously I didn't see it. I'm cautiously optimistic because I liked James Marsh's. He's the director of this. His last film, Shadow Dancer. I put it on our feature for the most, I guess, overlooked or underrated films of 2013. But either way, I mean, for listeners, this will be coming up in November 7th, I believe, in theaters. I'm going to move on to. Theory of Everything is a love story, but Nick and I are going to move on to a movie we saw and adored. That's a love story that's completely different compared to this one, I assume.
Totally. 100%. It couldn't be more different.
There isn't much to say because it does kind of leave you flabbergasted when you watch it, but in a good way. I'm talking about Peter Strickland's The Duke of Burgundy, which I think became one of the small critical breakout hits of the festival because it really I went to the first press screening for it. I had no idea what to expect because I saw the director's last film, Barbarian Sound Studio, which I thought was good, but it didn't really blow me away or impact me the same way it did with others. This one, though, I fell in love with this movie. It took me about a day. I really liked it. Then I just totally went head over heels for it. The plot, I don't want to give too much away because a lot of the enjoyment of it, I think, comes from the gradual reveals, which kind of plays throughout the film. But it's about two women who are in a very, I'll say, unconventional relationship. Kind of a master-slave BDSM situation. They live in this gorgeous kind of place, and the film deliberately kind of never reveals what time it takes place in nor where. It's just somewhere in Europe at some point in history. What it basically does is a lot of the film's intrigue, and I think what really drives it is watching this couple and seeing the dynamics of the relationship get explored, along with the kind of issues they come to I guess try to resolve with each other. But I'm not even getting to the part yet where I'm talking about how this movie is so freaking gorgeous on a stylistic level. Peter Strickland, last film, Barbarian Sound Studio, got its inspiration from giallos from the 70s. This one gets its inspiration from the Jess Franco films, the 70s European erotica movies. Just like so much amazing style just thrown all around every second of the frame. Nick, I'll let you go into the style because you can talk about it a lot better than I can.
Like you said, I mean, it floored a lot of critics, including myself, I guess, and I did not see Strickland's previous films. I wanted to see Barbarian South Studio. I heard mixed things about it. Everything about it just screams creation to me. That's why I was head and over heels about it. So, what can I say? Like, the style, I mean, holy crap! Like, the film starts off teasing you in a sense, thinking that for a second or two you might be actually watching a regular movie, and then it bursts into life with this like opening credit sequence with the music from Cat's Eye, this alternative pop group, which kind of like resembles a sort of Rosemary's Baby / Twin Peaks vibe in the music. And then so many colors, just so much fun. There's so much spirit in the actual style and like the zooms and the coloring, and as far as any release dates go, we don't have any, but at least IFC Midnight has distribution, so we're definitely going to see a US release.
Yes, I actually interviewed Peter Strickland while at TIFF. We're gonna hold off the interview until when IFC decides to release the film. But yeah, no, I mean, it's gorgeous. And one thing I want to just mention before moving on, and it's kind of what I love the most about the movie, is because it is this very, let's say, unconventional relationship of kind of BDSM, lesbian partnership. But really, at its core, it's a very authentic, universal love story about a relationship, because it's really about these two people who are madly in love with each other, but they have these kind of different personalities to a point where, one of the main conflicts is that one of the women is kind of not into the more extreme aspects in terms of bondage and whatnot, that while the other one is. And it's about kind of the two of them trying to find that level of compromise with each other and trying to find a way that they can, be able to stay together and, be able to move on from it and not have it kind of ruin things. I think that general aspect of, where you try and do things to help please the other person in the relationship, even if you don't want to do it, that's something that every relationship has. And I love putting that kind of very normalized context around such a very socially shunned type of relationship. Is just, I don't know, I love that aspect. I totally love that it's a really beautiful love story at its core with this very twisted, wild context around it. But speaking of wild, we're going to go into the other movie that Dustin and I were able to catch at the festival, which played at Cannes and is now came over here to North America. It's been a smash hit at Telluride, and it came over to Toronto, and once again it's been a smash hit. Talking about Wild Tales, which man. Dustin, you adored this movie, and I told you, I'm like, please see this movie, because I'm like, this is totally going to be up your alley, and I was so happy that you loved it. So I'll let you go into it and maybe just explain kind of the concept and why you loved it.
Okay, yeah. First of all, I mean, the producer of the film was none other than Pedro Almodovar, who's adore his style. And yeah, you're right. You told me about the film, which is this Argentina film called Wild Tales, which basically speaks for itself. I mean, it's wild. It's wild stories. There's 6 basically short stories in the film that are just completely insane. They sort of start off in this very normal, everyday situation. Then they just escalate. They just get out of control. It shows what you never see or never actually get to act out. And it's really difficult because, I mean, you really can't talk too much about any individual story so much because, I mean, there are six short stories, and none of them, they all sort of relate around showing vengeance or getting revenge on someone. But other than that, I mean, there's not like a continuous storyline between all of them that sort of connect them all. They definitely stand on their own. But it's so much fun, and it's very episodic. So the end of every sort of story or episode, it kind of fades to black. And during my screening, and I think yours too, CJ, you mentioned, it just got a ton of applause at the end of.
Yeah, actually at mine, because I saw it at the press screening, which tends to be a pretty quiet crowd because it's not a public crowd. They're there, they're either press or industry. But so most of the screenings I went to were pretty quiet. This one, like, people were applauding at the end, and that was one of the only screenings I went to where, like, the press industry were actually clapping, like they liked it that much.
Like at the end of the film itself, or at the end of like each one?
Oh, at the film itself, not each
okay.
story. I mean, I'm glad that happened in your screen.
Yeah, like after every single one, like it was just like clapping, and like people were just like, and I should have mentioned that like everyone, each one of the stories like ends on just a very like either like ironic way or a very just like crazy wild way. I don't know how to describe it any better than that, but they end on a very interesting way, so it definitely like sort of evokes evokes emotion after him. And so I think it's just a fun watch. It's brilliant, I think, screenwriting and storytelling.
Yeah, I mean, I should mention that these 6 stories are actually done by one director and writer, Damien Sifron, who I also interviewed during the festival, and I think he described it really well, the way the movie works. He said it's kind of like a rock album. Each story is kind of like its own song. I like that a lot because it really, like you were saying, Dustin, this is not, they're not narratively connected. These are connected by themes of, I guess, catharsis, of people who are frustrated with something, society or something in their lives, and they kind of just let it all out and go crazy. And I think that's why it's been really appealing to audiences, because they really get into that kind of I guess live vicariously through the craziness of the characters.
Yeah, he's the director and the writer, and I know in the Q&As he had mentioned, which I found kind of interesting, is he sort of played around with which order to show each short. I thought it was very interesting because he actually ended up going with the exact order that he wrote them in. So the first one that he wrote, he actually is the first one that shows up in the film, and so on.
Yeah, no, it's definitely Sony Pictures Classics actually bought this one up at Cannes, and I'm pretty happy about that, because I think Sony Pictures Classics is a really great distributor. Although they haven't confirmed a release date yet, but I asked the director and some people, and they said it'll be coming out in early 2015. But I guess to kind of wrap up with our best of the festival, we all saw our own individual films on our own. We want to talk about stuff that all of us saw either together or not. We'll go through. I'll start with you, Nick, if you want to talk about just some movies that you saw individually that you really want to kind of pimp out as stuff you liked.
Well, we did that feature together, and I talked about Christian Petzold's Phoenix and Roy Anderson's Golden Lion winner, Pigeons Head on a Branch, reflecting on existence. Those 2 movies I really, really loved, but people can sort of read my thoughts there. But what I wanted to just mention here are 2 movies one movie that is probably not going to be talked about a lot, which is Zabok's Haidu's Mirage, starring Isaac Di Bancole. He's like a Jim Jarmusch regular. He's the guy who played in Limits of Control, and he had a part in Ghost Dog Samurai, Way of Samurai. Anyway, great film, super well shot, gorgeous CinemaScope sort of 35 millimeter shooting, just the way that westerns should be, because this is sort of like a Hungarian modern western. It reminded me of Werner Herzog and Jim Jarmusch got together and wanted to do a homage to Sergio Leone. That kind of that's how the film's vibe plays out. It's a little scant story-wise, so I'm not, I'm not like in love with it, but it's definitely one of the better films I saw out of the 27 that I saw at TIFF. So I wanted to mention that one. The next one I wanted to mention was Miss Julie, which is the Lee Ullman directed. She's back after 15 years. Directed Jessica Chastain and Colin Farrell and Samantha Morton in the August Strindberg play. That one's not really taking so well with the critics, but I genuinely liked it only because it's so raw and such a crazy, visceral experience just to watch it, and the performances completely blew me away.
I'll leave Dustin, best for last. I'll hop in and mention 2 movies that I like quite a bit. Both of them without distribution right now in North America. The first one is called From What Is Before by Lav Diaz, who's a bit of a notorious figure on the art house scene. Yeah. He makes long movies. I mean, there's no way to get around it. He released a movie of his came out earlier this year called Norte: The End of History by CinemaGuild. CinemaGuild released it. It's 4 hours, 10 minutes long. It's one of my favorite movies of the year. So I wanted to check out his new one that was playing at TIFF called From What Is Before. That's that one ran for over 5.5 hours.
There's long movies, and then there's Lav Diaz movies.
That's
exactly.
not even as long as that's a short one. He has a movie called Melancholia that's 8 hours. He has a movie called Evolution of Filipino Family that's 11 hours, I believe. So this is just his style, and you have to be. His films are not complicated. They're not especially dense, I would say.
There's just no editing.
The narratives are easy to get into. It's just a matter of, it's just his pace. He takes a very slow, gradual approach, and you have to kind of get into, how would I put it? You really have to just kind of adjust to his rhythm. And once you do, it's quite easy. For me, it took about, I think, an hour of, I was pretty tired and stuff, but then once after an hour, I kind of settled in and went with it. It's to be very quick on the plot. It takes place in the 70s in a small barrio in the Philippines. It's leading up to when Ferdinand Marcos declared martial law in the country. This town, you follow a handful of villagers, and then a lot of bad things start happening, weird things. They hear noises in the forest. Cows start getting hacked up by somebody, they don't know who. Things like this, and it's all kind of... So the first, I would say, 3 hours is kind of watching this people kind of their day-to-day routine, and the last 2.5 hours of the movie are when the soldiers come in and kind of destroy everything. Lav Diaz, I'll put it simply, his filmmaking to me is like, I call like a teleportation machine. You really just kind of get in there, and you really feel like you're living with these people. It's very powerful stuff. I'll leave it there because I want to get into the next film called Tokyo Tribe by Sion Sono. It's I can't really describe anything about that movie because it's so dense and it's so packed and it's so overwhelming. It played Midnight Madness, and it follows. It takes place in a dystopian Tokyo where 23 tribes or gangs are more or less battling over one night to become the top gang in the city. It not only is it a hip hop musical with Japanese rappers, they cast real rappers and tattoo artists and people from the street in the roles. It's also an action movie with a lot of crazy intense fight scenes. It's also a comedy. It's also a horror movie. It's also a drama. It's also a love story. It's everything. It is literally everything. And I hope to God someone picks up for distribution. It's an experience just unlike anything else. Sion Sono has a lot of great movies. This one I think might be his masterpiece. But I'll leave it at Dustin. You want to take away?
Yeah, I know that we're getting close on our time here, so I'll just be really brief. My couple films that I really enjoyed in the festival that we didn't already mention were The Guest, which actually comes out in a couple days from now. By the time this comes up, it's probably already going to be out, so check it out. It's Adam Wingard's latest film. He did You're Next was his last film. It's a lot of fun, great soundtrack. It's funny, it's scary, it's awesome. So I caught it at South by Southwest. It replayed here, and it finished the festival. And the other film I wanted to quickly mention was that I thought was really well done and should definitely check out. Probably a little maybe undercovered is Heaven Knows What. Definitely check that out. I actually interviewed both the directors, Josh and Benny Safdie, and Ariel Holmes, who stars in the film, who the film's based off of. Definitely check the site. I have a full review of of Heaven Knows What already up on the site, and the interview should be posted by the time that you hear this.
You're listening to the Way Too Indiecast, the official podcast of WayTooIndie.com, where you'll find film news, reviews, and interviews with an emphasis on indie. Follow us on Twitter at Way2Indie and like us on Facebook.
The thing with TIFF is, a lot of these films you don't know what you're watching. You don't know. Sometimes it's a total crapshoot. You get a lot of duds, so we want to just very briefly dedicate some time to the movies that we really hated at the festival. So I'll go first on this one. I just want to bring this up. Dustin, you saw it and reviewed it on the site. I saw it because I just was curious. It's an Austrian film called Goodnight Mommy. A lot of people are praising this one. I honestly don't understand. It feels like a movie that it's like it was held back for over a decade because so much stuff in the movie is the type of shit you would have saw back in 2006. It's about two twin boys who think their mom is not their mom anymore because she went and got plastic surgery. She comes back with a big bandaged face. So they basically tie her up and torture her for a long time. And
That's true.
People are calling this grueling and intense and all this stuff. No, it's terrible. It's just watching a woman get tortured in these really awful, cringy ways, and it's literally torture porn. And I don't know why people are suddenly pretending like these crappy movies didn't exist, and this is something new or refreshing. The twist in the movie, there was a twist at the end that I didn't see coming, only because I thought to myself, it's been since like 2003 that someone actually used that twist effectively. No one uses it anymore because it's overdone and it's bad. And once again, they use it here, and I went, holy shit. It's just, honestly, it's a terrible... I really did not like the movie. I flat out hated it.
Well, yeah,
it's coming...
I definitely don't see like the praise that you're talking about, like the everyone going crazy over it, but I did like it a little bit more than you did. Although, yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said. There are some good points about the film, though. I mean, it's shot really well.
I think the first act is definitely good, and I think that's what drove me nuts even more, because it turns into such garbage at the end of it.
But I mean, its ambiguous parts are really good. It's sort of like you said, kind of at the beginning, the first half of the film, you don't really know. Sort of if the mom is pretending or if she's not, and if she's good or if she's bad type thing, and I think that's really fun.
Yeah, I will admit that's fine, but it's just, yeah, like it just, once it actually kind of lays out his cards, it just, sure. I go, okay, well now I see what you're doing, and you're not worth my time. But sure. I know that for distribution wise, Radius bought this up for distribution in the US, so it will probably be getting a VOD release sometime in the future. Dustin, I'll let you take this one because we actually saw this one together and we both really did not like it.
Yeah. It is The Voices starring Ryan Reynolds. And it actually starts off pretty interesting. It starts off in this fictitious town, and it's very playful and fun, and there's a lot of pink. They're all dressed up in pink, and that's sort of like the town color, I guess. And it was almost like this like musical, really, I don't know, really peppy kind of vibe, and then it turns really dark, which there's nothing wrong with that. So Ryan Reynolds stars as Jerry, and he's just like normal blue collar worker who works in this factory of sorts, and then you see him kind of go home alone, and then he sort of reveals this dark secret behind him, which is that he can hear his animals talk to him, can hear his animals' voices. So he has a cat who basically is like the devil on his shoulders, and he's got a dog who sort of acts as like the angel on his other shoulder. And they sort of talk to him, and he gets really crazy, and they convince him to do very bizarre, unthinkable things, essentially. The film also stars Andrew Kendrick and Jackie Weaver, which is probably why I had way high expectations for the film. It did get some good praise out of Sundance. I just didn't see it. I mean, I kind of enjoyed the fact that it sort of switched its tones a little bit. Like, I have no problem with that. I just don't think it did it very well. And there's moments when the film was obviously trying to earn laughs, and I honestly found myself laughing at it instead of with it. And it has some interesting style points to it. I just think that it tried too hard mashing these genres up, and it didn't go well for it.
Yeah, I would say, as I was telling you after we saw it, it's like someone made a really bad Tim Burton movie, and it's like we already have Tim Burton for that. So yeah. I don't know why we need to make it at all. It's just lame. It's just a really lame, unfunny movie that tries to be dark and wacky, and it tries to be over stylish, but I really just didn't care for the style at all. It really is not.
Yeah, it had some like aspects of it, like you were saying, because it tries to be stylish and sometimes it is, and it tries to be funny and sometimes it is, and it's dark and it's like there's moments when it works, but it never pulls it off altogether. Like it shows promise, like, and this is a director who maybe you need to watch out for, but this is not the film. I don't see what they saw, and maybe the screenplay was more interesting than on paper. But Lionsgate Films has the U.S. distribution rights to this film, but as far as I know, there is no release date. So.
Yeah, I was gonna say that it's a shame it's kind of disheartening to hear, because the director Marjan Satrapi is the one who wrote and directed Persepolis, which is like an awesome little animated movie from some years back. So I don't know if this is her first live action film. I'm not sure, but
no,
I'm not too familiar.
No, she made a kind of live action animation hybrid a few years ago called Chicken with Plums that also kind of just, I remember played at TIFF, but it kind of went nowhere.
Right.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was disappointed. I like Persepolis too, but this is a total misfire in my opinion. But either way, last but not least, Nicola, Please tell us your least favorite.
This is going to be painful just because I have to remember this movie now that I talk about it. But yeah, Revenge of the Green Dragons. This is basically, if you call this movie a flagrant, steaming pile of shit, you're being much too kind. It's a film that's presented by Martin Scorsese, which is the only reason why I wanted to see it. Also, one of the directors. It's directed by two guys, Andrew Liu and Andrew Law. Andrew Law is the director of Infernal Affairs, which is, of course, the one movie that inspired and was remade into Martin Scorsese's The Departed. So all of this stuff really kind of gave me expectations. I didn't want to watch the trailer. But after seeing the movie, I told myself that I probably should have, because the trailer would have indicated that this movie really just is terrible on every single level. Like, it's so cliched. It's a film that takes place in New York. It's kind of based on a true story. It's about Asian gangs in Queens who kind of rise up, and it's the story of these two brothers who get caught up and sort of assimilated into this gang called Green Dragons in the early 90s. They grow up, and it's their story. It's basically the evolution of their story and this gang, as the cops are trying to like catch them and stuff. And it pretty much ticks all the boxes in terrible ways of like cliches and convention of, action films and cops versus criminals. And A24 has the rights. I'm not sure how this movie got any rights, except, of course, then there's Martin Scorsese. I always remember that Martin Scorsese is attached to this, and I just feel really bad for him because, this is not a movie that he's going to want to boast about. This is not a movie that he's going to be talking and saying, oh, yeah, check out Revenge of the Green Dragons, because the movie is just terrible on every front. And
I remember
it doesn't
seeing
have a
that,
release
like...
date.
I remember seeing his name plastered all over like the poster art and the trailer, and basically anything that's attached to the film, his name gets attached to it as well. And I remember seeing that and watching the trailer actually for this one, and I was like, yep, I mean that's going to be its main selling point. So I kind of felt the same way. I'm like, oh geez, this is its only marketing is the fact that Martin Scorsese is the producer of the film. So that was a big red flag for me, and I guess it turns out that it definitely was a red flag.
Yeah, definitely.
I saw the trailer and I just said, oh look, another movie with a bunch of people talking in broken English about the American dream. This looks terrible, and I am like, okay, thank God it was validated. But I think that about wraps it up for the ones we hated.
Yeah.
So before we go, anyone, briefly just last thoughts about the festival and opinions, anything say you wanted to see that you couldn't catch during the fest, or just general what you thought of the festival.
All I wanted to say was I'll keep it this as brief as possible. Basically, the films that I didn't catch at the festival that had a lot of buzz and that you guys reviewed. So to the listeners out there, you can catch these reviews from Dustin and CJ on the site. It's 99 Homes, Wild Tales, which was already discussed, and as you can probably tell, it's amazing. Goodbye to Language 3D, the Godard movie, While We're Young, the Neil Blomkamp, and The Tribe, which is this movie that I'll let CJ and Dustin get into it because they also have it on their lists. I wanted to mention as well that it was interesting how CriticWire, the sort of this site that kind of pulls all the critics together, signaled out Phoenix and Nightcrawler as the standouts of the festival. So if you want to look at critical darlings, you can turn to those movies, Phoenix and Nightcrawler. The Look of Silence got Best Documentary, or was like sort of voted as Best Documentary. And most interesting of all is that Nina Hoss won over Jake Gyllenhaal for the lead performance. She wowed critics way more than Jake did, I guess. So there's that. I wanted to mention that I saw Jennifer L., fantastic actress in two super small roles in forgettable movies, The Forger and A Little Chaos, and she knocked it out of the park. So I really would love to see her in a lead role because she totally deserves it. I wanted to also mention Leviathan because a lot of people are talking about it. It's the Russian movie that I got to review in Cannes. It's a fantastic film, brilliant on all fronts, and it's going to pick up again because I think it's getting released end of the year, December 31st. And last but not least, I wanted to say that I found it very interesting that TIFF's new policy for, being super strict about what movies are premiering in the first weekend and how they have to be world premieres, et cetera, totally backfired on them because that whole idea was based around the fact that they wanted to be the ones to start off this Oscar buzz because of last year's 12 Years a Slave became such a huge Oscar movie, but then, it was supposed to world premiere at TIFF, and then it got kind of a sneaky premiere at Telluride, and that pissed off the TIFF directors. So this year they decided to sort of put the hammer down on that, and it kind of backfired because the two movies that really have the biggest Oscar buzz, aside from The Theory of Everything, is The Imitation Game and Wild, and both of those movies actually premiered at Telluride. So, oops, we'll see what happens next year, but there was a lot of talk and a lot of bitterness surrounding this whole TIFF policy, so it's going to be very interesting to see what they do next year.
Yeah, we kind of touched on it on the podcast, IndieCast number 3, the one right before this one of the policy and sort of what effects were before the festival. And I guess, if you listen to that and kind of see it, listen to this one, we can kind of see the before and after. And I think you're right. I kind of agree on that. That's sort of my thoughts on the festival, that I'm not sure if the new policy is paying off. But although I was a firm stance on that and how I don't believe that this is a good thing for viewers, for audiences attending the festival, I don't know. Maybe it's just a downer year. Maybe just instead of things not being done in time or whatever, it just might not have a lot of options to pick up. But I'm definitely disappointed in the festival as a whole as well, and I'm not sure if the new policy was the full reason behind it or not. But I'll just quickly name up a few films though too that I really wish I was able to catch during the festival but wasn't unable to, which is also The Tribe, also Goodbye to Language 3D. For me, I also have How Ha, on my list, which I know you caught in Cannes, Nick, and Foxcatcher, which also is a Cannes title. And I really wish I was able to catch those, but I was unable to.
Yeah, I think that the one we're all kind of really annoyed that we missed was The Tribe. It was one of the, from my experience, it was one of the more buzzed about titles on the ground, talking to people, overhearing conversations. People were really into it. Yeah, I think for me, definitely, I missed out on While We're Young, and I really wanted to catch it. I mentioned in the last IndieCast that I wanted to not miss another Noah Baumbach movie at TIFF, and then I did. So
I know it's on both your guys' list, but I do have to tell you guys, I did see it, and I was a little disappointed in it. It's definitely no Francis Ha. It's a little bit more of an accessible film. It's definitely has the laughs where it needs to be, and it's definitely more controlled. But I mean, yeah, you guys should totally see it and tell me what you think. But definitely, I just realized that now it's on both of your guys' lists, and it was on mine too, but yeah.
Yeah, and also like a couple can holdovers. I mean, I know Nick adores Leviathan and Winter Sleep, and those are two movies I was really bummed I could not catch at the festival. I think in terms of the premiere policy, I think it's a combination of factors. I still don't like the policy they had. It really didn't work anyway, considering TIFF was advertising the world premiere of the Paradise. It was called, I think, Escobar Paradise Lost with Benicio del Toro and Josh Hutcherson. Well, that was supposed to be the world premiere, but then Telluride had a sneak preview of it a couple days before. So it didn't, like, it pretty much was like, the premiere thing didn't even work. Although TIFF was cool with it because the movie was scheduled later in the fest anyway, which is when they said world premieres don't happen. But it doesn't matter. I mean, I think they've just, it backfired, and yeah, like Nick said, the award winners were all stuff that premiered at Telluride. I think maybe one of them was actually a world premiere, like a runner-up was. It's just, yeah, I mean, I think that I hope next year they really revise it or just ditch it because it's not really helping the festival. And I think the fact that, yes, it was not a very exciting year film-wise in the back half. I mean, TIFF, like the public are just going to go see the stars they want to see in the movies or whatever. I don't think it's going to have as much of I don't think people are going to care as much from the main audiences. Yeah, I think that wasn't especially a smart decision. I think we went over the last one. I mean, for listeners, if you want to listen, go over to the Way Too Indiecast number 3, where Dustin and I kind of really discussed this whole premiere policy in depth. Lastly, I just want to bring up a film that it just came on my radar very recently, called Murder in Paco, by a director named Raoul Peck. It played in the master's program. It didn't have a lot of buzz going in the festival, but the people who did see it were really supportive of it. So I don't know any info about the film in terms of availability, but I'm really, I'm definitely putting my radar. If it ever pops up, I'm going to try and seek it out because I was surprised at the loud praise it got. I think that about does it for us on this very special extended TIFF episode. Our TIFF Indiecast, our I guess hangover, so to speak. So as we always do, closing out. Dustin, where can we see you on Twitter?
You can find me at djancic.
And Nicola?
You can find me at Nick Grape.
Okay, and you can find me at CJ_PRIN. That's CJ_Prin. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Way Too Indie. Like us on Facebook. And be sure to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes and rate us. Leave a comment. We'd love to hear it. Any suggestions, ideas you guys want to throw in, or you'd want to start a movie for us to cover, definitely give it to us. We're open to any suggestions. And also be sure to, we've been talking about the films here for TIFF, but we have interviews, features, news items, and plenty of reviews. I think we're over 36 reviews now on the site for TIFF. Go to www.waytooindie.com.